The crystal towers of Kepler 442b sparkled under the light of twin suns. Inside the tallest spire, Administrator Veltar's four hands shook as he read the message from Earth. His insect-like eyes clicked rapidly, a sign of deep worry among his people. "A human is coming," he whispered to his assistant Nixara. "They're sending someone called Jake Morrison to check on our work." Nixara's wings buzzed with fear. "When?" 3 days. The news spread through the colony like wildfire. Within hours, every Zephyrian knew that one of the terrifying humans was coming to their peaceful world. Parents grabbed their children and rushed them to the deep caves beneath the Crystal City. Workers dropped their tools and hurried home to prepare hiding places. Elder Kixara stood in the center of the main plaza, her old voice carrying across the settlement. "Remember the stories," she called out. "Humans are the death dealers. They fight wars that last centuries. They turn stars into weapons. They never stop, never give up, never show mercy." Young Pip, barely old enough to work in the Crystal Gardens, tugged on his mother's lower arm. "Mama, why are humans so scary?" His mother, Zara, pulled him closer. "They conquered death itself, little one. They travel between galaxies like we walk between rooms, and when they decide something must be done, nothing can stop them." She shuddered. "I heard they once moved an entire planet just to win a battle." Veltar tried to calm the growing panic, but even he believed the legends. Every species in the galaxy knew about human warriors. They had stopped 3 different alien invasions. They had colonies on worlds that should have killed any living thing. They built cities in the hearts of gas giants and mined asteroids near black holes. "What does this human want with us?" asked Nixara. "We're just a small mining colony. We grow crystals and send them to the trading posts. We don't fight wars or build weapons." Veltar looked at the production reports on his desk. Numbers had been falling for months. Workers were making mistakes. Equipment broke down more often. 3 families had even asked to leave the colony. "I think Earth is unhappy with our work. Maybe they think we're not trying hard enough." The truth was worse than Veltar admitted. Ever since the first rumors that humans might visit their world, the entire colony had lived in fear. Workers spent more time looking over their shoulders than focusing on their jobs. Children had nightmares about giant humans stomping through their crystal gardens. Even the bravest adults jumped at shadows. As night fell across the colony, families sealed themselves inside their homes. The crystal spires, usually glowing with warm light, went dark one by one. The streets emptied completely. Even the nocturnal workers who normally tended the gardens stayed hidden. In the deep caves, mothers sang quiet lullabies to keep their children calm. The song spoke of safer times before anyone knew humans existed. Some of the older children whispered their own stories about the terrible things humans might do. Would the human destroy their beautiful crystal city? Would it take their parents away? Would it turn their peaceful world into a battlefield? Far above the planet, Jake Morrison sat in his small transport ship and watched the beautiful world grow larger through his window. This was his first solo mission for Earth's Colonial Affairs Division. At 28 years old, he was young for a diplomatic inspector, but his supervisors trusted his calm nature and problem-solving skills. Jake had read the reports about Kepler 442b during his 3-week journey. The Zephyrians were peaceful crystal farmers who had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago. Their technology was simple but effective. They had no military and no history of violence. Their crystal exports helped power communication systems across dozens of worlds. What puzzled Jake was the declining productivity. The report showed good workers, decent equipment, and plenty of raw materials. Yet somehow the colony's output had dropped by 30% in the past year. His job was to find out why and help fix the problem. "Beginning final approach to Kepler 442b, Jake said into his communication system. "Colony Control, this is Inspector Morrison requesting landing clearance." Silence. Jake tried again. "Colony Control, please respond." "This is Earthship Pioneer's Rest requesting permission to land." Still nothing. Jake frowned and checked his equipment. Everything worked perfectly. The colony's communication array was active. Someone should be answering. Maybe they were just busy. He decided to land at the main platform and introduce himself in person. The Pioneer's Rest touched down gently on the crystal landing pad. Jake put on his standard diplomatic uniform and stepped outside. The air smelled like flowers and clean rain. The crystal buildings around him were more beautiful than any picture could show. Streams of clear water flowed between the towers, and gardens of glowing plants created a peaceful atmosphere. But something was wrong. The landing platform should have been busy with workers and officials. Instead, Jake saw only empty buildings and abandoned equipment. Half-eaten meals sat on tables outside a cafe. Tools lay scattered on the ground as if workers had dropped them and run away. "Hello?" Jake called out. His voice echoed between the crystal towers. "My name is Jake Morrison. I'm here from Earth's Colonial Affairs Division." No answer. Jake walked deeper into the colony. His footsteps sounded loud in the strange silence. He passed through a marketplace where goods still sat in stalls untouched and unguarded. Fresh fruit rotted in baskets. Crystal jewelry sparkled in empty displays. His handheld scanner showed life signs all around him, but they were all underground. Deep underground. It was as if the entire population had suddenly decided to hide in the caves beneath their city. Jake had never seen anything like it. Usually, alien colonies were excited to meet human visitors. People gathered to ask questions about Earth and human culture. Children especially loved to see humans and learn about different worlds. Here, he seemed to be walking through a ghost town. As the local sun began to set, Jake made his way to the guest quarters Veltar had prepared for him. The rooms were beautiful but empty. Fresh food waited in the kitchen, but no one was there to greet him. A welcome message played on the communication screen, but it sounded nervous and formal. Jake sat down at a crystal desk and began writing his first report. Outside his window, the colony remained dark and silent. Somewhere below, he knew hundreds of Zephyrians were hiding and waiting. But waiting for what? What did they think he was going to do? Whatever had frightened an entire civilization, Jake was determined to fix it. But first, he needed to understand why a peaceful people had become so afraid of one ordinary human from Earth. Jake woke up to another silent morning. He had hoped that daylight might bring some Zephyrians out of hiding, but the colony remained as empty as the day before. After eating breakfast alone, he decided to explore more of the settlement and try to understand what was happening. The crystal gardens were stunning in the morning light. Tall plants with glass-like leaves caught the sunlight and scattered rainbow patterns across the walkways. Water flowed through carved channels, creating a gentle music that should have been peaceful, but the emptiness made everything feel haunting instead of beautiful. Jake found a building that looked like an office complex. Inside, he discovered workstations with half-finished projects, personal items left behind, and computers still running automated systems. Everything suggested that people had left quickly, possibly in a panic. On one desk, Jake found something interesting. Scratch marks covered the crystal surface in neat rows. He counted them and realized they formed a calendar. Someone had been marking off days, and at the end was a note in Zephyrian script that his translator read as human arrival. They had been counting down to his visit like prisoners waiting for execution. Jake's communication device buzzed. Finally, someone was trying to contact him. The screen showed a nervous-looking Zephyrian with the formal clothing of a colony administrator. "Inspector Morrison," the alien said, his translated voice shaking slightly. "I am Administrator Veltar. I apologize for not meeting you yesterday. There were unexpected circumstances." "No problem," Jake replied, trying to sound friendly. "I'd like to meet with you today to discuss the colony's situation. Is there somewhere we can talk?" "Of course. I will come to the main plaza in 1 hour, please. Please wait there for me." The way Veltar said please sounded more like begging than politeness. An hour later, Jake stood in the center of the Crystal Plaza. Right on time, Veltar emerged from a building entrance, but he moved like someone walking to his own trial. The Zephyrian's forearm stayed close to his body, and his insect-like eyes darted around constantly. When Veltar reached Jake, he stopped a full 10 feet away and gave a formal bow. "Inspector Morrison," Veltar said, "welcome to our colony. How may we serve you?" The word serve came out like a whimper. Jake stepped forward to close the distance, and Veltar immediately stepped back. When Jake tried again, Veltar actually flinched as if expecting to be hit. "Administrator Veltar," Jake said gently, "I'm just here to help. The reports show that your productivity has decreased, and Earth wants to understand why. Maybe we can work together to solve any problems." Veltar's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Yes, of course. Our productivity. We have struggled recently. Equipment failures, supply delays, worker difficulties." "What kind of worker difficulties?" Veltar looked around nervously. Mistakes, distraction. Some families have requested transfers to other colonies. Jake pulled out his datapad to take notes, and Veltar jumped backward so fast he nearly fell over. I'm sorry, Jake said, confused. I'm just going to write down what you tell me. Is that okay? Yes. Yes, of course. Please do whatever you need to do. But Veltar watched the datapad like it might explode. As they talked, Jake learned about the colony's recent problems, but he also noticed something else. Every time he moved his hands, Veltar flinched. When Jake reached into his pocket for a pen, the administrator's breathing became rapid and shallow. When Jake gestured while talking, Veltar's eyes followed his hands as if they were weapons. The Zephyrian was terrified of him. Not just nervous or uncomfortable, actually genuinely terrified. Administrator, Jake said slowly, have I done something to frighten you? Veltar's silence lasted too long. Finally, he said, all species know of human capabilities, Inspector. We are simply careful around those who could destroy worlds. Destroy worlds? Jake almost laughed. I'm an inspector. I check reports and help solve problems. I don't destroy anything. But Veltar didn't look convinced. Their meeting ended awkwardly, with Veltar backing away and bowing repeatedly before disappearing into the crystal towers. Jake stood alone in the plaza, more confused than ever. That evening, Jake sat outside his guest quarters, reviewing his notes and trying to make sense of the situation. The colony's problems weren't technical or financial. They were psychological. The workers were so afraid of humans that they couldn't function normally. As darkness fell, Jake noticed a small movement near the crystal gardens. Something small and quick had darted between the glowing plants. His scanner showed it was a young Zephyrian, probably a child. Jake stayed very still and waited. After a few minutes, the small figure crept closer. It was definitely a child, with the smaller size and brighter coloring of young Zephyrians. The little one moved from plant to plant, getting closer to where Jake sat. When the child was about 20 feet away, their eyes met. The young Zephyrian froze completely, like a small animal caught by a predator. Jake could see the terror in those large, compound eyes. Very slowly, Jake smiled and raised one hand in a gentle wave. The child took a tiny step backward but didn't run. Hello, Jake said softly. My name is Jake. What's your name? The child said nothing but continued to stare. Jake had always been good with children. His sister had 3 kids back on Earth, and Jake was their favorite uncle. Children everywhere seemed to sense that he was safe and kind. Slowly, Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small holographic projector. The child tensed, ready to run, but Jake moved very carefully and placed the device on the ground between them. Would you like to see something pretty? Jake asked. He activated the projector and a small image appeared in the air above it. It was a picture of Earth's moon rising over a calm ocean. The hologram was beautiful and peaceful, showing gentle waves and silver moonlight. The young Zephyrian took a step closer. Jake changed the image to show a field of flowers swaying in a soft breeze. Then a butterfly landing on a child's hand. Then a family of rabbits playing in a meadow. With each new image, the child crept closer. The fear in those large eyes began to mix with curiosity and wonder. These are from my homeworld, Jake explained quietly. Earth. It's very different from here, but it has beautiful things too. The child finally spoke in a voice so soft Jake almost missed it. Are you really a human? Yes, I am. But I'm not scary. I promise. The stories say humans are death dealers. Jake's heart broke a little. What stories? Everyone knows. Humans fight wars across the galaxy. They turn stars into weapons. They never stop and never give up. The child's voice shook. They say humans conquered death itself. Jake understood now. Somehow the galaxy's stories about humans had become legends of unstoppable warriors. No wonder the Zephyrians were terrified. Those stories aren't wrong, Jake said carefully. But they're not complete. Yes, humans fight when we have to. We protect people who can't protect themselves. But most of the time we do other things. We explore, we learn, we make friends. We tell stories and laugh and take care of our families. The child considered this. What kind of stories? Jake smiled. Would you like to hear one? For the first time, the young Zephyrian nodded. Jake began to tell a simple story about a brave little girl who made friends with a dragon that everyone thought was scary. As he spoke, he used the holographic projector to show images of the characters and their adventures. The child listened with growing fascination. and Jake noticed that other small movements in the darkness suggested more young Zephyrians were listening from hiding places among the crystal plants. When the story ended, the child stepped closer. "What was the little girl's name?" "Emma," Jake said. "She was very brave, just like you are for coming to listen." The child glowed a little brighter, which Jake had learned was a sign of pleasure among Zephyrians. "Will you tell another story tomorrow?" the child asked. "I'd like that very much," Jake replied. "What's your name?" "Pip." "It's nice to meet you, Pip. Thank you for listening to my story." As Pip disappeared back into the crystal gardens, Jake felt hopeful for the first time since arriving. Maybe one story at a time, he could help the Zephyrians understand that humans weren't the monsters from their legends. Maybe he could show them that humans could be friends. Word traveled fast through the underground tunnels where the Zephyrian children hid. By morning, every young one in the colony had heard about Pip's encounter with the human. Some said Pip was the bravest child who ever lived. Others worried that the human had cast some kind of spell on him. Pip's mother, Zara, was both proud and terrified when her son told her about the story. "You spoke to the human?" she asked, her forehands trembling as she checked him for injuries. "He showed me pictures, Mama. Beautiful pictures of his world. And he told me about Emma and the dragon." Pip's eyes glowed with excitement. "He's not scary at all. He's nice. That's what makes humans so dangerous," Zara whispered. "They can make you trust them before they strike." But Pip shook his head. "No, Mama, this one is different. You should hear his stories." Meanwhile, Jake continued his official inspection of the colony. Each day a few more Zephyrians emerged from hiding to do necessary work, but they still avoided him whenever possible. Veltar met with him daily, but the administrator remained nervous and formal. Jake was beginning to understand the real problem. The colony's declining productivity wasn't caused by equipment failures or supply shortages. It was caused by fear. Workers who were constantly afraid made mistakes. They avoided areas where they might encounter him. They spent more time hiding than working. The solution wasn't technical. It was psychological. Every evening, Jake sat in the same spot outside his quarters with his holographic projector. On the second night, Pip returned, but this time he brought two friends. Jake told them a story about a young boy who learned to communicate with aliens by sharing his favorite games. On the third night, 5 children gathered around him. Jake told them about a space explorer who discovered that different species could become friends by learning about each other's cultures. By the fourth night, 8 children sat in a semicircle while Jake told stories. He noticed adult Zephyrians watching from farther away, hiding behind crystal formations but clearly listening. Jake began to tailor his stories to address the fears he heard from the children. When one young Zephyrian mentioned being afraid of the dark, Jake told a story about a human child who was also scared of darkness, until he learned that shadows were just places where light hadn't reached yet. When another child asked if humans really conquered death, Jake told them about human doctors who worked to heal people and save lives. He explained that humans didn't conquer death, but they fought against it to protect the people they loved. "Humans die too," Jake said gently, "just like everyone else. But we try to make sure that the time we have is good and meaningful." Pip raised his small hand. "Is that why you came here? To help us?" "Yes," Jake said. "When something is wrong, humans like to fix it. Not by fighting or destroying, but by understanding and helping." An adult voice spoke from the darkness. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" Jake looked toward the voice but couldn't see who had spoken. "You don't have to believe me," he said. "You can watch what I do and decide for yourself." The next day, Jake made a point of demonstrating his words. When he found a broken water recycler in one of the work areas, he spent hours fixing it himself instead of demanding that the Zephyrians repair it. When he discovered that some of the crystal-growing equipment was designed wrong for Zephyrian physiology, he redesigned it to work better for their 4-armed bodies. Veltar watched in amazement as Jake worked alongside Zephyrian technicians. You're helping us?" "That's what I'm here for," Jake said, adjusting a tool handle to be more comfortable for Zephyrian hands. "Earth doesn't want you to fail. We want you to succeed." That evening, Jake's audience had grown to 15 children and several adults who no longer bothered to hide. When Jake finished his story, one of the adults stepped forward. It was Elder Kixara, the oldest and most respected Zephyrian in the colony. "Human Jake," she said formally, "I must ask you something." "Of course, Elder." The stories our people tell about humans. Are they true? Jake thought carefully before answering. Some of them are true. Humans have fought wars. We've built weapons. We've done things that other species might find frightening. He paused. But those stories only tell part of who we are. They don't tell you about human parents who sing lullabies to their children. They don't tell you about human artists who create beautiful music. They don't tell you about human farmers who grow food, or human teachers who help others learn. Elder Kixara's compound eyes studied his face. Why do only the war stories spread? Because scary stories travel faster than happy ones, Jake said sadly. When people are afraid, they remember the frightening things and forget the peaceful ones. And what would you have us remember about humans? Jake looked around at the gathering of Zephyrians, young and old, all listening carefully to his words. I'd like you to remember that humans are people just like you. We have families we love. We have dreams and fears. We make mistakes, but we try to learn from them. And we believe that different species can be friends if they take time to understand each other. Pip spoke up. Will you tell us a story about human families? Jake smiled. I'd be happy to. He told them about his own childhood, about his parents and his sister and her 3 children. He described human holidays and birthday parties and family dinners. He talked about how human children played games and asked endless questions and sometimes got scared of thunderstorms. As he spoke, Jake noticed something wonderful happening. The Zephyrians were beginning to relate to the stories. They nodded when he described parents worrying about their children. They laughed when he told funny stories about his nephew's first attempts to ride a bicycle. They listened with understanding when he described how his grandmother helped him overcome his fear of heights. Human children are afraid of heights too? Asked a young Zephyrian named Click. Oh yes, Jake said. I was terrified of tall places when I was little. My grandmother had to help me climb my first tree by showing me how to take one branch at a time. I'm afraid of deep water, Click admitted. The underground pools where we grow special crystals. That's very normal, Jake assured him. Being afraid doesn't make you weak. Learning to face your fears makes you brave. Elder Kixara stepped closer to the group. You speak of your grandmother with great love. She was very important to me. She taught me that every person has value no matter how different they might seem. Jake looked at the elder respectfully. I think you serve the same role for your people. For the first time since Jake's arrival, Elder Kixara smiled. Perhaps humans and Zephyrians are not so different after all. That night, as the gathering broke up and the Zephyrians returned to their homes, Jake felt a real sense of progress. The fear was beginning to fade, replaced by curiosity and cautious friendship. Pip was the last to leave. Jake, he said quietly, tomorrow can you tell us about human music? I heard that humans sing to their children. I'd love to, Jake replied. Maybe you could teach me a Zephyrian song too. Pip's bioluminescent patches glowed brightly with joy. Really? You want to learn our songs? Very much. I think music is one of the best ways for people to understand each other. As Pip hurried home to tell his family about the next day's plans, Jake realized that something remarkable was happening. The children who had once hidden in terror were now eagerly anticipating his stories. And through the children, the adults were beginning to see humans in a completely new way. Stories, Jake thought, might be the most powerful diplomatic tool humans possessed. Not because they could frighten enemies, but because they could turn strangers into friends. The transformation of the colony amazed everyone, including Jake himself. What had started as evening story sessions with a few frightened children had grown into something much larger. By the end of his first week, nearly half the colony gathered each night to listen to Jake's tales and share their own stories in return. The children were no longer afraid to approach him during the day. When Jake walked through the crystal gardens in the morning, young Zephyrians would run up to greet him with new questions and excited chatter about the previous night's story. They showed him their favorite hiding spots among the crystal formations and taught him the names of different plants in their language. Jake! Jake! Pip called out as he spotted the human near the water recycling center. I learned a new song last night. Do you want to hear it? I'd love to, Jake replied, setting down his inspection tools. Pip began to sing in the melodic Zephyrian language, his voice creating harmonics that resonated through the crystal structures around them. Other children heard the music and came running to join in. Soon Jake was surrounded by a choir of young voices creating beautiful, complex harmonies. When the song ended, Jake applauded. That was incredible. What was it about? It's about the crystal gardens growing, explained Click. How tiny seeds become big. Beautiful plants with time and care. Just like friendships, Jake said with a smile. The children giggled at the comparison, and Jake realized how much they had all changed. These same children had been hiding in caves just a week ago, convinced that he was a monster who would destroy their world. During his daily inspections, Jake continued to work closely with the adult Zephyrians. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. Workers no longer jumped when he approached. They asked questions about his recommendations and offered their own suggestions for improvements. Veltar was perhaps the most changed of all. The nervous administrator had relaxed enough to actually have conversations with Jake, instead of formal, fearful meetings. I must apologize, Veltar said, as they reviewed production reports together. We have not been good hosts to you. You were protecting your people, Jake replied. I understand why you were afraid. The stories we heard. Veltar shook his head. They made humans sound like walking disasters. Wars that lasted centuries. Weapons that could destroy star systems. Species that vanished after encountering human military forces. Jake nodded sadly. Those stories aren't lies. Humans have fought terrible wars. We've had to stop species that wanted to destroy or enslave others. But that's not all we are. Yes, I'm beginning to understand that. The way you work with our people, the patience you show with our children, the stories you tell, these show a very different side of humanity. Most humans are more like me than like the warriors in those legends, Jake explained. We're teachers and farmers and artists and parents. We tell jokes and worry about our families and try to make our worlds better places to live. Veltar studied him thoughtfully. Why doesn't the galaxy hear those stories? Because peaceful stories don't spread as fast as scary ones. When people are afraid, they remember the frightening things and forget the good things. That evening, Jake's audience was larger than ever. Adults now sat with their children, listening openly instead of hiding in the shadows. Elder Kixara had become a regular attendee, often sharing Zephyrian stories after Jake finished his tales. Tonight, Jake announced, I want to tell you about something very important to humans. It's called family. He began to describe his own family in detail, his parents who still lived in the house where he grew up, his sister Lisa, who was a teacher on Mars, her husband Ben, who designed spacecraft engines, and their 3 children who were probably asleep right now millions of miles away. My nephew Danny is about Pip's age, Jake said, looking at the young Zephyrian. He loves to build things with his hands just like you do. My niece Amy asks questions about everything just like Click. And my youngest nephew Carl is still learning to walk, but he laughs at everything he sees. Do you miss them? Asked a young Zephyrian named Zill. Very much, Jake admitted. That's one of the hard things about my job. I travel to different worlds to help solve problems, but it means being away from the people I love. Why do you do it then? Pip asked. Jake thought for a moment. Because I believe that all people, no matter which world they come from, deserve to be happy and safe. When I help solve problems on worlds like yours, I'm making the galaxy a little better for everyone, including my family, Elder Kixara spoke up. You sacrifice your own happiness to help strangers? It's not really a sacrifice, Jake said. Helping others makes me happy too. And knowing that I'm working toward a galaxy where all species can be friends, that's something my family would be proud of. An adult Zephyrian named Torin, who worked in the crystal mines, raised his hand. Jake, can I ask you something that's been bothering me? Of course. The reports we heard said that humans never give up. That you keep fighting until you win, no matter how long it takes. That sounded terrifying to us. But now I wonder, is that quality only used for war? Jake smiled. That's a very good question, Torin. You're right that humans don't give up easily, but we use that same determination for lots of things. Human scientists worked for hundreds of years to cure diseases that killed millions of people. Human engineers spent decades figuring out how to travel between stars safely. Human teachers work their whole lives to help children learn and grow. So the same quality that makes humans dangerous in war makes them helpful in peace. Asked Veltar. Exactly. When humans decide something is important, we keep working on it until we succeed. The question is what we decide is important. Pip raised his hand excitedly. What did you decide was important here? Making sure you were all safe and happy, Jake said immediately. When I saw that everyone was afraid, I decided that fixing that fear was more important than anything else. And you didn't give up, even when we were mean to you, Click added. You weren't mean, Jake corrected gently. You were scared. There's a big difference, Elder Kixara stood up slowly. Jake, I think it's time I shared a story with you. A Zephyrian story that our children have heard for generations. Jake listened carefully as the elder told a tale about a great crystal that grew in the heart of their homeworld. The crystal was beautiful and powerful, but it was also very dangerous if not handled carefully. Many Zephyrians were afraid to approach it. But one wise Zephyrian spent years learning about the crystal, understanding its nature and finding ways to work with it safely. Eventually, that crystal became the foundation of their entire civilization. The crystal was like the stories about humans, Elder Kixara explained when she finished. Powerful and potentially dangerous, but also capable of great good when properly understood. That's a beautiful story, Jake said, and very wise. My people have been afraid of the human crystal for too long, the elder continued. But you have shown us how to approach it safely. You have taught us that understanding is better than fear. A young Zephyrian named Vex spoke up. Jake, will you teach us more about human culture? I want to understand why humans are the way they are. I'd be happy to, Jake replied, but I'd also like to learn more about Zephyrian culture. Teaching and learning work best when they go both ways. Yes, several voices called out at once. Elder Kixara smiled. Then perhaps tomorrow night we should have a cultural exchange instead of just stories. We can teach you about our music, our art, our history, and you can teach us about yours. That sounds wonderful, Jake said. I think that's exactly what the galaxy needs more of. Different species taking time to understand each other. As the gathering broke up that night, Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The colony's productivity problems were already solving themselves as the fear faded away. Workers were returning to their jobs with renewed energy. Families were coming out of hiding. Children were laughing and playing again. But more importantly, Jake had helped build something that would last long after he left. The Zephyrians would never again be afraid of humans based on scary stories alone. They would remember that humans could be friends, teachers, and helpers. And when other species heard about the friendship between humans and Zephyrians, maybe they would be less afraid too. Pip was the last to leave, as always. Jake, he said quietly, when you go back to your family, will you tell them about us? Absolutely, Jake promised. I'll tell them about the bravest young Zephyrian I know, who was the first to listen to a human story. Pip glowed brightly with pride and happiness. And will you come back someday? If I can, Jake said. But even if I can't, you'll always remember our stories, won't you? Forever and ever, Pip promised before hurrying home to tell his parents about the next night's cultural exchange. Jake's final week on Kepler 442b flew by faster than he could have imagined. The cultural exchange sessions had become the highlight of each day for both him and the Zephyrians. Adults and children worked together to teach Jake about their crystal growing techniques, their musical traditions, and their intricate system of underground tunnels that connected every part of the colony. In return, Jake shared human customs, showed them recordings of Earth's oceans and forests, and taught them simple human songs that the children practiced with delighted enthusiasm. The language barriers seemed to melt away as understanding grew between the species. The transformation in the colony was remarkable. Production numbers had not only returned to normal but exceeded previous records. Workers who had been paralyzed by fear now approached their tasks with confidence and creativity. New innovations emerged as Zephyrian workers felt safe enough to suggest improvements to their equipment and processes. Veltar could hardly believe the change in his own reports. Jake, I must ask you something, he said as they sat together in his office, reviewing the final productivity numbers. How did you know that stories would solve our problems? Jake smiled. I didn't know for sure, but I've learned that most problems between people come from misunderstanding. Stories help us see each other as individuals instead of scary legends. The children were the key, weren't they? Children usually are, Jake agreed. They're naturally curious and willing to trust. When the adults saw that their children were safe and happy around me, they began to believe it was possible for them to be safe too. Veltar shook his head in amazement. For months, we lived in terror. We thought a human would come to punish us or destroy our colony. Instead, you came to help us succeed. That's what most humans would do, Jake said gently. We're much better at building things up than tearing them down. On Jake's final evening, the entire colony gathered in the main plaza for a farewell celebration. The crystal towers had been decorated with flowing banners, and bioluminescent plants created a warm, festive glow throughout the settlement. Tables groaned under the weight of traditional Zephyrian foods prepared specially for the occasion. Elder Kixara stood before the crowd and called for attention. Friends, family, and honored guests, she began. 2 weeks ago, we cowered in fear at the mention of a human visitor. Tonight, we celebrate the friendship that has grown between our peoples. The crowd buzzed with agreement, and Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. Jake Morrison has shown us that the stories we believed about humans were incomplete, the elder continued. Yes, humans are powerful. Yes, they are determined and capable of great deeds, but they are also kind, patient, and willing to help others succeed. They are teachers and friends, not just warriors. Pip stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in beautiful crystal fiber cloth. Jake, we made this for you. Jake carefully unwrapped the gift and gasped in surprise. It was a crystal sculpture showing a human figure surrounded by Zephyrian children, all of them looking up at holographic images floating above the human's hands. The detail was incredible, capturing not just the physical appearance, but somehow the emotion of those first story sessions. It's beautiful, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll treasure it always. When you show it to your family, Pip said, you can tell them about your friends on Kepler 442b. I will. And I'll tell them about the bravest young Zephyrian who was willing to listen to a stranger's story. Elder Kixara gestured for quiet again. Jake, we have one more gift for you, a story. She began to tell a new tale, one that Jake had never heard before. It was about a crystal singer who traveled from world to world, sharing songs that brought peace to troubled places. The crystal singer never forced anyone to listen, but those who chose to hear the songs found their hearts lightened and their fears eased. This story will be told to Zephyrian children for generations to come, Elder Kixara said when she finished. They will know that kindness can come from unexpected places, and that friendship is possible between any peoples who take time to understand each other. Jake realized that the elder had created this story to honor their time together, and he felt deeply moved by the gesture. As the celebration continued, Jake found himself surrounded by Zephyrians wanting to say goodbye. Workers thanked him for helping improve their equipment. Parents thanked him for making their children feel safe. Children pressed small handmade gifts into his hands and made him promise to remember their names. Torin, the crystal miner, approached with a serious expression. Jake, I need to tell you something. When you first arrived, I was part of a group that we considered trying to drive you away. We thought if we made things difficult enough, you might leave and report that our colony was hopeless. But you didn't, Jake observed. No. After the first night when Pip came back with stories about your kindness, we decided to wait and see. I'm glad we did. You've given us hope for the future. You gave me something too, Jake replied. You taught me that patience and understanding can overcome even the deepest fears. As the evening wound down, Jake made his way to the landing platform where the pioneers' rest waited to take him home. Nearly the entire colony had gathered to see him off, their bioluminescent patches creating a constellation of warm light in the darkness. Jake turned to address the crowd one final time. Thank you for teaching me about your beautiful culture. Thank you for trusting me with your children. And thank you for showing me that friendship between species isn't just possible, it's wonderful. Will you come back? Several voices called out. If I can, Jake promised. But even if I can't, our friendship will continue. The stories we've shared, the understanding we've built, the respect we've learned for each other. These things will last forever. Pip ran forward for one final hug. Don't forget us, Jake. Never, Jake promised, kneeling down to the child's level. And you don't forget that humans can be friends, okay? I'll tell everyone, Pip said solemnly. I'll make sure the whole galaxy knows. As Jake's ship lifted off from the crystal landing platform, he looked down at the colony one last time. The Zephyrians had arranged themselves in a pattern that spelled out, "Thank you," in their traditional script, their glowing bodies creating the message in living light. Jake's official report would recommend the Kepler 442b colony for commendation rather than discipline. He would detail how fear-based misunderstandings had caused their productivity problems and suggest cultural exchange programs to prevent similar issues elsewhere. But the real impact of his mission would be measured in ways that no report could capture. The Zephyrian children who had once hidden in terror would grow up knowing that humans could be trusted friends. They would share that knowledge with their own children and their children's children. The story of Jake Morrison and the Crystal Colony would spread throughout the galaxy, carried by traders and diplomats and travelers. Other species would hear how patience and storytelling had turned fear into friendship. They would begin to question their own scary legends about humans and wonder if there might be more to the story. 6 months later, Jake received a communication from Kepler 442b. It was a video message from Pip, now serving as the colony's junior cultural ambassador. The young Zephyrian was teaching human songs to a group of visiting aliens from 3 different species. "Hi, Jake," Pip said brightly into the camera. "We've had lots of visitors since you left. Everyone wants to see the colony where humans and Zephyrians became friends. I've been telling your stories to all of them, just like you taught me, behind." Jake could see Zephyrian children playing with young aliens of species he'd never seen before. They were laughing and sharing toys and teaching each other simple words in their different languages. "The Colony Council asked me to tell you that productivity is up another 20%, Pip continued. "But more importantly, we're getting requests from families who want to move here. They say our colony is famous for being the friendliest place in the sector." Jake smiled as he watched the message. This was what the galaxy could be like if all species took time to understand each other, instead of believing scary stories. "Oh, and Jake," Pip added at the end of his message, "we still save your chair at storytime every evening, just in case you come back. The children here now beg me every night for bedtime stories about the human who taught us not to be afraid." As the message ended, Jake looked at the crystal sculpture on his desk, remembering the terror that had once filled an entire world at the mention of his name. Now those same people were teaching others about human friendship. Sometimes the most important victories weren't won with weapons or technology, Jake reflected. Sometimes they were won with patience, kindness, and a willingness to share stories that helped strangers become friends. And in a galaxy full of differences and misunderstandings, perhaps that was humanity's greatest strength of all.